Hey folks, Lee with Reel Rollers, and today we're going to talk about the reel clutch engagement, how to adjust the reel engagement lever up there at the top to ensure that it's snapping back and disengaging properly, how to adjust the tensioner, which is also on the reel clutch, that's up there by the handlebars, and in the event that your reel clutch down here is actually stuck engaged, how to unstick it. Before we do anything, we want to take the side cover off first. We have a video on that if you have any questions on how to take the reel chain side cover off. We also are going to check to make sure that our reel clutch bolt is tight and determine whether the clutch is engaged or not. So the first thing I'd like to do is make sure that this bolt, which is critical, is tight. So that's the bolt right here going into the reel clutch, holding it onto the reel assembly. So what I like to do is grab a 2x4, or in this case I'm going to use a hammer real quick, and I just want to set it inside the reel so that when I rotate this reel up, it's holding in place. And I do that because this bolt right down here on the reel clutch, when I go to tighten it, righty-tighty, it's going to want to spin the reel as well, and this hammer with the rubber handle is going to stop the reel from rotating so that I can make this tight. The other cool thing that I purchased earlier this spring was this. This is a torque wrench reader, and I can show you what that looks like. Got off Amazon. I think it was $49. We want this bolt to be at 22 inches of pressure, so I have it set for that. And when I turn this, it's going to beep at me when I get to 22 if it was loose. If it's already tight, it'll beep right away. So I'm going to start pulling it. So I'm already tight. It didn't rotate at all. That's great news. That means the reel clutch bolt is tight and is working. If this were loose, the clutch sometimes would have a hard time engaging and disengaging because there's too much slack. So I just want to take that off the plate as far as ensuring that's not the reason the reel isn't engaging and disengaging like you'd like. Now that we covered that, let's talk about the adjustments, and last we'll talk about how to unstick the reel clutch in the event that when you disengage, it's not disengaging down here under the side cover. Let's begin. Hey folks, Lee with Reel Rollers, and I'm here to give you guys a quick few tips on the Revolution reel engagement clutch. Now, some of the questions that we've been getting are around the reel clutch not disengaging exactly when you pull the lever back. I'm going to show you guys 3 tricks to making this. Number 1, unstick your clutch if it's stuck. But number 2, make it operate as it should when you disengage and engage the reel, making sure it disengages completely. So let's start. There's really 3 steps to this. 1, I took the side cover off. I've got that set to the side so I can see the chains and the clutch. If you don't know how to do this, we have a video on removing the side cover. But step 2, I first want to see how this mechanism's working on the reel clutch. Now, first thing I want to check is to see, is my reel clutch engaged or disengaged? So what I'll do is I'll spin the reel, my hand slowly, to see if this whole thing rotates, and the reel can rotate without it. So I know I'm disengaged, but let's pretend that I was stuck and engaged. Let me show you why this could happen. Number 1, let's look at the adjustments up here. So I'm going to walk around to the lever, the reel engagement lever, and one of the things that we're finding is that, 1, this tension is turned up way too high. So the first thing I want to do is loosen this tension, because there should be a ton of slack back here, even more than this when it's not engaged. So what I'll do is I'm going to try to turn this dial so that I have 80% of my threads up this way. Now, if I go to turn this dial and I can't turn it, simply grab needle nose pliers and a Phillips head screw and just loosen this a little bit so that you can turn the dial easily. It has a lock nut, so it won't come off. So first thing I'm going to do is turn this up so that about 80% of my threads, as you see, are up on this side. This gives me plenty of slack. When you engage this reel, it only takes a millimeter of movement. It doesn't take much at all. So I'm going to go ahead and engage this reel. And then when I let go of it, I want to make sure there's slack. So now I'm going to engage the reel. And the other adjustment I want to make, now that I made this 80% threads north on the reel clutch, is I want to flick this. And if this lever doesn't return all the way back and create slack, I'm going to make an adjustment. And this has been something that we've found during assembly, that maybe these screws are too tight. And I'll show you about that. So first, I'm going to disengage the reel, and look how it's sticking. It's barely moving. It needs to be all the way back here. This is still tight. And if you go down to the clutch and look, even though I flipped the lever, it's still engaged. This is something that's happening a lot. You still see that gap. And the reason being is that this housing for the reel lever isn't going all the way back because it's too tight in this inside of this casing. So watch, when I go all the way back, and I force it, you see the reel clutch went back in place. So let's adjust this. So come around here real quick. So first thing we did is we adjusted this to be 80%. Next thing we're going to do is, if you look at this assembly, there's 6 total Phillips head screws. These 3 on the corners, 1, 2, 3, that holds this whole housing together. We're not going to mess with those. But these 3 in between the corners, 1, 2, 3, the tighter those are, the tighter this is to move this lever. And these apparently are a little too tight. So what I'm going to do is rotate them back 1 turn. And what that will do is that's going to loosen up this handle so that when I engage the reel, it's still taut and tight. But when I go to disengage the reel, it snaps back and I've got this slack. So let's go down below and see if it does it a little bit differently. Again, slack is key when it's disengaged. So I'm engaging it, plates are rotating. Now when I go to disengage it, it pops. It's got slack. That's usually the problem, and usually 95% of the time, that's the issue. Too tight of a cable up here. So you do the dial, 80%, and then just take these 3 tensioner screws that hold this lever in place and just rotate them off 1/2 turn or enough so that when I flick the lever off, it snaps and I've got all this slack. I don't want it to stop halfway and I still have tension because it won't release the clutch. So now that I've got that done, I've adjusted this. Let's pretend we got these adjustments perfect, right? We don't have to pretend that, we know it's like that. But let's pretend that the real clutch won't disengage. It just hasn't for a long time. Let me show you how to fix that real quick. Now that I've made those minor adjustments, super easy to do, let's pretend that my reel was engaged, my clutch. And when I go to spin this, everything's going together. The way to unstick this, it's usually because at some point it was pushed in too far. All you need to do is take your reel to bed knife, handy tool. I'm going to put it up here on this shaft. The reason I'm doing this is I can rotate the engine now, and more importantly, this lower sprocket by hand. So if I need to unstick this clutch, super easy. I don't take anything apart. Just take a hammer. This is a really thick casing, and this clutch has just gotten jammed in there because there was way too much tension on the upper end. So all I'm going to do is put my tool right here, and I'm going to go to this metal casing with a normal hammer, and I'm just going to tap this casing and rotate the entire clutch. So I'm going to tap, rotate, tap it a few times, and 100% of the time, as you rotate this clutch and you keep tapping on it, you're going to see all of a sudden everything pops, and it's going to disengage this reel clutch. And now that we've made the appropriate adjustments up on the reel lever with the tensioner as well as with the lever housing and loosen that up, you'll find that this clutch will now disengage and re-engage the way it's intended. I hope this short video helps you guys out. And one last thing, this is really thick, as I mentioned. Unless you take a sledgehammer to it, you really can't do damage to this thing. It's okay to tap it. It's not going to do anything to this casing. It's very solid. So go ahead and tap it just to free it up this one time. And now that you've made those adjustments up there, the mower should be working great. If you have any questions or any concerns, feel free to give us a call or email us at sales@reelrollers.com. This is Lee with Reel Rollers.